I'm so fired up to be with you all today and to be able to speak about one of my favorite women, a hero to me, a great sister in the faith, and that is Esther. But before we do Esther and talk about her and all the ways we can learn from her, you know, I'm Latina, and I'm very proud of it, but I'm also more proud to be a disciple and a sister and a daughter of God. And, you know, we're supposed to be family, so I love it when we show love to each other, give hugs and kisses. And, you know, in the Latin culture, they're holy kisses. In the church culture, I should say. You know, and I really think we just need a little bit more love energy. If you could stand up and just give one kiss to someone on a cheek. The Latin culture, you can blow kisses, I guess. Some of you are sick, so... Okay, I think that's waking us up and setting a great tone here. Well, you guys are very, very loving. Thank you. All right. Okay. All right, sisters. Now it's time to study the Bible, all right? Amen. Very proud of you guys. You got really into the love part. I have 3 points today from Esther's example. Number 1, if I die, I die. Number 2, obey your Mordecai. And number 3, lift others high. So I'm going to give you a little background, and then you'll understand these points a lot more as we read through Esther. You know, we don't have time to read through the whole book. It's only 10 chapters, and there's so much in it, but I'm supposed to only speak for a little bit of time here. So I want you to just try to put yourself back there. This is around 484 BC, where the book of Esther starts. It's at the height of King Xerxes' Persian Empire. That was one of the most powerful kingdoms at that time, and it was huge. It stretched from East India through the Middle East, including Iraq, Iran, Egypt, and some of coastal Africa. He was a very powerful king, and he wanted to show off his power. He threw an incredible 6-month open house for many hundreds of dignitaries and people from all over his kingdom, just trying to show all that he had, his, possessions, his gold, everything, his kingdom. And the last part of his open house, he decides to throw a huge 7-day banquet. You know, I loved our banquet on Sunday night, and it was awesome. But he threw a little different kind of a banquet. It was an all-men's banquet, and they were able to drink with no restrictions. The wine was just poured out on them. And his queen, Queen Vashti, who will be shared about by a sister later, had a separate women's banquet. And this was going on, the banquet, for 7 days. He was high in spirits, the Bible says. In other words, drunk. And he decides he wants his eunuchs, to bring his beautiful wife, Queen Vashti, into the banquet with all these other drunk men, only wearing her royal crown. And in the Jewish books, it says that she was naked. He wanted her to come in, she was beautiful in form and beautiful. And she refuses. I mean, imagine being in her shoes. I would not want to go in a situation like that ever, and that's be a nightmare. And she gets deposed, kicked out of being queen because of her refusing to go and see the king being drunk with all his drunk friends. They weren't even really his friends, just a bunch of drunk men. And 4 years later, the king's anger finally subsides over this situation because she didn't come. And to them, it was a sign of disrespect to the king and all his fellow leaders. So they got rid of her, and he really started to regret that he didn't have Queen Vashti around. So his attendants come up with this brilliant idea to search for beautiful virgins all over his huge kingdom. And they go after young women that are 13, 14, 15 years old, that are young, beautiful virgins. It was a cattle roundup of beautiful virgins. Again, imagine the horror, the fear for these young women as well as the families. You know, we have some great young women in the South region that are awesome disciples that are 13, 14, and 15. We have Sophia, who's 13, and she's from Russia, but she's been with us for 2 years in LA. We have Shafali, 14, from India. And we have Cameron, who's from good old Long Beach. And she's 14. And just imagine, as those of you who know these precious young women, for them to be kidnapped like that and taken into the kingdom of Xerxes, and they have a 12-month beauty treatment. And I was talking about it with Kip, and he says they probably did that so to make sure they weren't pregnant. Part of the reason for 12 months. Because they didn't have pregnancy tests back then like we do. And, Esther was so beautiful. We find out in chapter 2, that's where we meet her. She gets rounded up. And she was probably only, again, like 13, 14, or 15. And she was a Jewish young lady. Her real name was Hadassah, but the Persians gave her the name Esther. She was exiled from her homeland, and she was orphaned. We don't know what happened to her parents, but somehow they died in maybe the exile. It was a horrible thing that the Jewish people went through, our brothers and sisters. She was adopted by her uncle Mordecai, and you're going to hear more about him. But just imagine again your life just being taken like that. And, she does everything they tell her to do. She has a great attitude. I believe God is trying to help her and use her. And Mordecai every day is pacing outside, checking on how she is. He loved her so much. He was a great father figure in her life. So she does become queen. And a lot of us know that part. And we think it's cool, but I don't know how cool it really was. The way she became queen. She became queen the 7th year of Xerxes' reign in 479 BC. And I share all this because these are real dates. This really happened. And there's a movie that I really enjoyed a few years back. It's called One Night with the King, and it talks some about this whole experience. There's another movie that I don't really care so much about, but it does depict King Xerxes and the power that this man had, and that's 300. And it shows the military campaigns against Greece. So this is the King Xerxes that we're talking about in the Bible. And she was married to this man. Of course, all the women that were not chosen, and there were probably hundreds, ended up in his harem as concubines for the rest of their lives. So they never had their own families. They were just stuck there. And again, I'm looking at it from a modern point of view. I don't know how the women looked at it back then, but I just know I'm thankful that God somehow was taking care of Esther through all this. And there was a purpose. And my title is Such a Time as This. And it gets used a lot, but I want you to understand why. God works in mysterious ways sometimes. And I want to fast forward. Again, I'm giving you background, and then we're going to get into the scriptures. But in chapter 3, there's a man named Haman who's an Agagite. And he's the second most powerful man in the kingdom. And he's just full of hate for the Jews. And it's something that actually started hundreds of years before. Samuel, who was a great prophet, killed King Agag. And it was ordered by God that he do that. And so the Agagites just hated the Jews from that whole experience. There was a lot of hate that just went on for generation to generation. And we still see that going on in the Middle East. We still see that sometimes going on here. The hate and prejudice that we can just take in from our ancestors. Haman wants to bring revenge on the Jews, so he tricks the king into signing an edict to annihilate the Jews in one day. And, it's just a Holocaust, killing every Jew, man, woman, child. That's what the edict said to do. A massive slaughter like Hitler, but in one day, because there were thousands of Jews living in this kingdom, this huge kingdom of the Persian Empire. And of course, the whole city, especially Susa, where the kingdom, the capital was wailing, bewildered, shocked that such a edict, because they put it all over the place. The bulletin was everywhere about the Jews were going to be slaughtered. And of course, Mordecai wails and mourns and dresses in sackcloth and ashes. And, Esther hears about this. She doesn't know what's going on, asks what's going on. And Mordecai sends a message to her that she needs to do something as the queen and appeals to her to go to the king to take this edict away. Well, her first response, she felt helpless and fearful, said she couldn't do anything. And that's where I want to start, in Esther chapter 4, verse 12. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. And of course, she did what Mordecai asked her to do. She made her presence known to the king, and he could have decided to kill her on the spot, but no. I believe because of God and the prayer and the fasting, he held up his golden scepter, and she was allowed to come and approach him. Again, a very different culture, but that's how they did it back then. And, I'm just so grateful for her attitude. She relied on God. She knew that prayer and fasting would help her to have the strength to do that. And my first point is, if I die, I die. And that's from verse 16. In the Message Bible, it actually says that. If I die, I die. And it's not this suicidal depression kind of mentality. It's a courageous willingness to die for her people, to save her people. And I bring that up because I really believe prayer is so incredibly powerful. And, 2014 was designated for the City of Angels Church as our year of prayer. And sisters, how have you been doing there in your prayer life? I'm so grateful for the City of Angels family. And, it's been an intense year for Kip and I. We're grateful. God is doing amazing things all over the kingdom. But on April 4th, I went in for my annual female checkup. And I actually was a bad girl, a naughty girl. I didn't go in 2013 because it was a busy year. 2013, our daughter had her first baby. ICCM was birthed, and that was a lot of work. And then we have a lot of churches out there that we try to go help, plus trying to take care of the City of Angels Church. My life was busy, and I was enjoying everything and feeling a little funny at times. I was getting dizzy at times, especially when we did our world travel, crazy flights and all over different time cultures. Those of you who've traveled from other places, you know what I'm talking about. Well, my doctor, we're very good friends. I've had her for a few years. We're very, we've shared a lot. She's an amazing female doctor. And she said, I have some concerns from your blood work in 2012, and I need to do some more blood work today. So she did. She took a bunch of blood. And then she said, I want you to come back in 3 weeks. Well, I did go back. I was very obedient and a good disciple to her at that point, because she said, we really need to find out what's going on. And she was very alarmed. She said, I need to do more blood work. she said, I think you could possibly have a precursor to bone cancer called MGUS, or you have bone cancer, the early stages. Of course, I was in shock, and she did more blood work, even more specific stuff, and that day, April 24th, I started praying and fasting like I had never done before, because I'm not afraid to die. In fact, to me, heaven's going to be amazing, incredible. But I want to bring a lot more people with me, and I don't feel like I've done my part enough yet. And Kip and I were praying and fasting and juicing for about a month. And, you know, I cried out to God so many times on my own, in my knees, late at night, early in the morning. I just begged God, please give me 20 more years. I want to see the world evangelized in my lifetime. And I also want to see our children restored in their faith and see churches that are really loving and strong and vibrant and really changing this world. And I felt the most intense battle in my body. And those of you, I know a number of you have been through some crazy cancer scares and health challenges. I really felt the demons of Satan in my body. And then I felt angels working too. It was the weirdest thing, the weirdest experience to have your body just so weak. And your brain, I mean, I was dizzy a lot. And, you know, I've been a very healthy person. I'm very healthy in my diet. I found out also I'm gluten intolerant. So it's also a good thing. I changed that. And I want to just share the email that I was able to share with Kip to our family, because it was really an intense time for our family. My father's still alive. He cried so many times over, because we watched, actually, my aunt died of bone cancer a few years back. And we have cancer a lot in our family. So on June 11th, I went in. I saw the cancer doctor a couple times. He ordered a bunch of tests, and this is the last test and meeting that we had with him. Dear family, good afternoon. Thanks so much for all your prayers for Mom, Elena, and me. They have been answered. We went to Mom's cancer doctor today, and when Dr. Lowe came in, he had a big grin on his face. He said, I have fantastic news for you guys. But before I share this, I must say that I've never seen anything like this happen in all my days as a doctor, and he's been working as a cancer specialist for quite a few years. He's in his 40s. He's one of the top doctors. God gave me him. He's a wonderful man. I really trusted him a lot. Kip and I had some great talks with him, and he said, we've done a thorough workup on your blood, your urine, your bone marrow. I went through a lot of tests. Your calcium has fallen from 11.2 to even below normal, 9.5. Your cancer markers, which I had, proteins that are produced by cancer cells or other cells of the body, they're no longer in your blood, your urine, and your bone marrow. Everything is just clear. And these were his words. He said, either we made a mistake, but I can't imagine because we did so many tests, or it's a miracle. And, of course, he said, I'm sure you both prayed a lot because he knew we were both ministers. And, you know, I do believe God answered our prayers. And it blew my mind in 1 month's time that God took away the cancer through prayer and fasting. And I really believe, sisters, you know, I always think of Carol Castillo when I was going through this. She's been battling cancer, and she's been free and cleared, but she had to have surgery after surgery and all kinds of chemo and treatments. But she's here today. I'm so proud of Carol. It's such an amazing thing when you get your life back, because I had to change a few things in that month. I couldn't do as much, and Kip was awesome, very compassionate, very supportive. But I do remember how I felt, God, life is so precious. So precious. And I hope you feel that today, and that you are here to serve God for such a time as this. And yet we have to be willing to die. And I was surrendered to die. I thought, well, if I die, maybe that's the only thing that's going to wake up some of the people in my family to get serious about their walk with God. I didn't know, but I am grateful that I have a second chance, a new lease on life. And I really do want to challenge you guys, please, 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 sisters, whatever problems you're going through, pray and fast. Personal problems, church problems, and then do whatever you need to do to get sisters to help you. A group fast, like here. And I love our mercy fast. The day before our mercy day, we fast all around the world. And I believe that's why we're seeing so many miracles all over the kingdom, because we fast and pray. Okay, let's talk about Esther chapter 8. And sorry, I need to move along here. I hope you'll read this book and get inspired as I was. I've been reading it for a bit here, reading all kinds of different translations, documentaries about it, and commentaries about it. And, of course, there's nothing like actually reading the Bible. Different things hit you. In Esther chapter 8, verse 3, Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the golden scepter to Esther again, and she arose and stood before him. And I wanted to read this part because I want you to see her attitude. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor and thinks it's the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman the Agagite devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see a disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? And of course, again, I share this because she had to be very clever and courageous in dealing with the king. She had one banquet with Haman there and wasn't quite sure it was the time to bring up the whole situation. And then she had another banquet. And Haman was confronted at that time by her that he was devising an evil plan to kill her and her people. And of course, the king gets furious and goes out of the room, and Haman begs for mercy, and he thinks, the king thinks he's attacking the queen, and so he gets killed, impaled, in fact. And it just shows how things can turn so fast. But the job wasn't done yet. The edict was still signed by the king. So she had to approach the king actually 4 times to complete the job. She had to risk her life 4 times. And I think sometimes when we read this, we go, oh, just she prayed that one time and fasted and everything just changed. And it took a lot of creativity, a lot of perseverance, and humility. And that's the thing I want you to see here was her humble heart. And that leads me to my second point, obey your Mordecai. Prayerfully, you have a Mordecai in your life. It doesn't have to be a guy. It can be a woman. Somebody that's a great, trustworthy, spiritual mentor. Someone that really loves you, loves your soul, that helps you in your spiritual life. And in Esther 2, she's already the queen. I'm going to jump back because I want you to see her heart again. Verse 19, here she'd just been appointed queen. They threw this huge banquet for her with all these nobles and officials. And in verse 19 it says, when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. Even as a queen, her authority was much higher than Mordecai, and she could do whatever she wanted in some sense compared to him, being a Jew on the outs, so to speak. She still obeyed him, and it wasn't the right time to present who she was. Of course, she did at that second banquet, that she was a Jew and wanted to save her people. And it was really amazing to see also her heart in Esther 4. You know, when she at first was fearful, reluctant, hesitant, Mordecai challenged her again, and she was willing to risk her life. Do you have people like that speak the truth in love to you when you're going through some tough things, that will challenge you, that will cause you to go to your knees and pray and change some things in your heart and your character. You know, Esther had been queen for 5 years before this Haman edict to annihilate the Jews came out. So she was probably enjoying life to a certain extent. You know, the queen, beauty treatments and, you know, living in the palace, eating probably a lot of whatever they eat back then. Her life was pretty easy. But she was willing to change all that and stand up and not be in her comfort zone. And again, a lot of us need to be willing to do that. And I want to share another example from our lives because my Mordecai, without a doubt, is Kip. I'm so grateful for him. I've had some female Mordecais in my life, too, and I'm really grateful for all of them. But he's been the long-standing one. You know, we've been married 38 years come this December. And, you know, it's awesome to be married in the kingdom and all the discipling we got, especially in our early years of marriage. But there was a really dark, terrible, hard time in our lives. And I'll share about that a little bit later. But we were in Portland, and God really healed my heart. We moved to Portland in 2003, and God did some amazing things. That little church was struggling. Kip and I were struggling. But God started working. We just started studying the Bible again, being disciples, calling everyone to be family in the church, and repenting of our sins, our bitterness especially. My bitterness, I had to repent. And, you know, things were really growing. People were moving from all over the place to come to Portland, find revival, but we were being persecuted by our own brothers and sisters in other parts of the ICOC church that we were a part of and that we helped to start. And I'll never forget, in October of 2006, we were asked to go and help with the Little Hilo Hawaii church, and with Kyle and Joan Bartholomew. And they wanted us to come help their church and disciple them and really train them because they were a young ministry couple. No one had really trained them. And I'll never forget that weekend. It was a crazy weekend. People flew from all over the kingdom to oppose us, came to the actual Friday night Devo, and were trying to be negative and hostile. And here I thought we were brothers and sisters. But then, you know, I knew that this is what happened to Jesus. And, you know, we just prayed again and fasted, and we realized that we had to leave Portland and go to a bigger city because Portland's beautiful. It's one of the cleanest, it's a really great city. For those of you who've never been, it was a great place for me to go and heal. And we were there for almost 4 years, and the church was awesome, very loving, very merciful, very kind with Kip and I. But we knew we needed to move, and I needed to leave my comfort zone. And we needed to go to a world city in the U.S., either New York or L.A. is what we thought. Well, I did not want to go to L.A. I had so many hurts and just sad memories in L.A., and I didn't want to deal with the conflict. There are some people that are in the ministry in L.A. that I just didn't even want to see. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. Well, we put out a fleece. We said, God, show us where we need to go, either L.A. or New York, wherever a remnant group comes out. And we were talking with people in both cities that were calling us and, you know, really thinking about where they're at spiritually and wanting to follow the Bible and the doctrines that they were taught in the early days of their Christian walk. And I was like praying, God, please, 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 let it be New York. And, of course, our son was living in New York, who I love a lot. And I thought, well, that's the way we can get him back. Well, that door shut. And the LA Remnant group came out 3 weeks later, and it was so God because it was with Sal and Patricia Velasco and Ron and Tracy Harding, and Sunday just melted my heart when Priscilla Velasco was baptized, and it was just again an affirmation that God is really helping us and working, and you have to step out on faith and leave your comfort zone. Well, then when we came to L.A., I saw why God brought us back to L.A., because we have so many people we love here. There are a lot of happy memories that I started remembering, too, and a lot of wonderful people that God had allowed us to kind of know. The church was over 10,000 people when we left, when we were asked to step out of the ministry. And, you know, I'm really grateful for Kip being a Mordecai to me because he kept praying with me and we would fast. He said, Elena, you got to surrender your heart and give your heart to these people in L.A. Like you did in Portland, because I really didn't want to go to Portland either and stay in the ministry back in 2003. A lot of you think I'm a super submissive woman, and, I try to be, but I still have a sinful nature that I have to crucify and deny myself and take up my cross. And actually, I'm so grateful for Kip being my amazing soulmate and Mordecai. And I pray that you have that in your life. Do you have someone that you're a great disciple to? And then are you that for your sisters, where you're a great team? Because we're not going to win the world unless we're a team. And, no woman is an island, so to speak. Some of us pride ourselves in being independent, and we just cannot allow the world to teach us that false doctrine that I am woman, I'm strong, I can do it all. No, you can't. You need God, first of all, and then you need each other, and you need the men as well. So if you don't have a Mordecai in your life, get one. And maybe you're all alone in a really small remnant group. I know a lot of us are doing Skype now to keep in touch. That's how Debs has been keeping in touch with Brandon. I'm so grateful for Skype. I know that's how I started with Linda Moreno back in the day when everything was crashing in Santiago. Use technology to keep your discipling. The third point is lift others high. Let's go back to Esther chapter 8, verse 1 and 2. Of course, we know Haman was impaled and everything came back on him, his hate, and even on his family. God took care of his people. And I want you to see verse 1 and 2, Esther's heart again. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king for Esther and told her how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and he presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. And I read that because she was given the estate of Haman, and she immediately just gave it to Mordecai and told the king who he was, her uncle who loved her and raised her, and the king immediately trusted Mordecai because of Esther. And, again, they were a powerful team, and here Esther was lifting Mordecai up higher than herself, because now he was the number 2 guy in the whole kingdom. He got the signet ring, and he was the one that could do whatever the king could give to the people to do. And it was a good thing he got that signet ring, because then they had to write the changing of the whole edict to allow the Jews to defend themselves. And I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot, because some of the other women are going to talk about it later. But are you working as a powerful, unified team with your husband or with the brothers or the sisters that are in your ministry? And it's an incredible thing when we work together, but it's a terrible thing when we don't. And it's the way Satan really gets there and destroys us and destroys our churches. And I saw that happen. Let's go to Esther 9, verse 29. Again, their teamwork. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of Xerxes' kingdom, words of goodwill and assurance to establish these days of Purim. And actually, Teresa Broom is going to talk about that. But because of Esther's courage, there's a huge Jewish holiday that's called Purim for this whole event that we just studied about. And, again, I just think it's amazing how she worked with Mordecai, and Mordecai was the one that had the authority to write these letters and to send them all over the kingdom. It's kind of like the good news email, huh? We've got to have great communication and lift each other up and not be competitive with each other, but be proud of each other and proud of the way that God's using us, sisters, all of us, all around the world. There's a Proverbs that we love to teach in the marriage ministry, but it really applies to every part of the women's ministry. It says, the wise woman, Proverbs 14, verse 1, don't turn there, I'll just read it. The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down. You know, and you can tear down your house, your family, your church. And let me tell you, I saw that happen with our old church. And I even see it sometimes the women, when the men aren't doing what they need to be doing, we try to take over. We do it at home and in the church. And I'll never forget, as I shared, we went through some really tough times, 2001, 2002, 2003. Thank God we went to Portland. But we were being opposed a lot, and by some of our very close friends, even family members. And I'll never forget, in 2005, we were asked to speak at a campus ministry, world conference. And the week before, KIP was actually kicked off the program, and they allowed me to still teach. And it was a very confusing time. And those of you in Portland remember, we were just treated like we were hostile enemies or something, because we were bearing fruit, and a lot of people were moving to Portland, and we believed in discipling, and we believed in having women's ministries and all kinds of things that I thought, why did you stop believing in all this stuff? What's going on? But it's Satan. Satan was at the bottom of all of it. And I'll never forget, one of the really close friends of mine came all the way up to Portland right after that conference, and I laid it out in that class that I taught. I said, sisters, you need to take responsibility for our churches. We've got to be family. We got to love each other, take care of each other, not fight each other. And they deleted my class, of course, from the whole. That was just such a weird time. And the sister came to see me the following week, and she said, Elena, you need to stop enabling Kip in his pride and in his slanderous bulletins he writes. And I was like, what are you talking about? These are not, he's taking a stand on the Bible. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to divide from Kip. And I love him, and I see his sin more than anybody. But I know he loves God. And I know he's trying to do his best for God. And, I couldn't believe she was trying to use loaded words just to pull me away. And I even saw that happen with Linda Moreno, with Raul. Satan will do whatever he can to destroy us. And he goes after our marriages. He goes after our brothers. And sisters, you need to lift your husbands high. You need to encourage them. You need to not compete with them. And this is very important. We are equal to our brothers. Not in authority, though. Because of, again, keeping peace in the church. We are equal in importance and equal in value to God. And your purpose here is unique. And I know I don't try to compete with Kip. That would be crazy anyway. But there was a time when he was really hurting and really weak, and I had to constantly just pray and try to figure out ways to encourage him and not say anything negative. And our mouths can really tear down the people around us. And I really find joy in lifting others up. Not falsely, genuinely lifting others up. I'm so proud of Helen Sullivan. Their family, they were one of the original families to move to Portland to train for the ministry. And we became very close friends. Well, of course, we sent them to Phoenix, Santiago, and, they've been moving a lot for the sake of the kingdom. And, their family was going through some really tough things last year. But I'm so grateful all 3 of her teenage children are now disciples. I just find so much joy in that. And then I find so much joy in Teresa Broom. She's another Latina, and she's been around since the early days of Boston. And she read and heard a lot of slanderous stuff about Kip and Maya's leadership. She was close to a lot of people that really opposed Kip especially. And, it was causing a lot of hurt in her own faith and her own just wanting to be unified with us. Well, they moved to LA 3 years ago, and we worked through all this, and it's just amazing now. We're totally unified, and, her and Chris are now leading back in their beloved New York, and I'm so proud of them. Another sister I really want to just hold up and lift up is Carrie Willis from Sydney, Australia. Carrie and Joe Willis sold their home, left everything in Australia to move to LA to get their faith back, to get their dreams back. And they had 2 teenagers. They were willing to do whatever to get their faith and their kids to see the kingdom of God again. And, I'm so proud of them. They planted the church in Sydney. Their inaugural service was February 2nd. And then her father died 2 weeks later. And, of course, he'd been sick for a long time with leukemia. But she was able to be at his bedside. And her faith allowed her to help so many sisters. And people have become Christians there in Sydney. But in the midst of everything, she was dealing with her father dying. And yet God allowed her to be with her dad when he died. And it's a great example because we're going to all be dealing with that in our families. And some of us already have. It's a really intense, difficult time to stay close to God, especially when your family's not right with God. Another sister I want to hold up is Leanne Kernan. She's an amazing woman. A lot of you don't know, but Leanne and Tim were part of the original 42. They weren't from Portland. They were from Canada. But they came and helped us to rebuild the LA City of Angels Church in 2003. And they were only able to stay for a short time because they're Canadian. And then we had to send them to London, and they started the remnant group there, and that was incredible. But then they needed some strengthening. They came back, and then they went out to Paris, planted that, and then they came back. And, they've been back to LA 3 times for further just encouragement, training, and then they've been a great joy in helping us in LA. They've helped so many people. But last summer we asked them to go to Chennai, India to help with the church there. And, I appreciate how much Leanne's been willing to uproot her kids and move around, and she nearly died in India. She got dengue fever. She was in the hospital for a week. Her son, Jim Jr., also got dengue fever. He was in the hospital for 5 days. She was willing to literally risk her life for the sake of the kingdom and really risking even her children's lives. And more of us are going to have to do this because the world is in a crazy state. I know even in Ukraine and Russia there's, a lot of unrest, and we're sending our brothers and sisters there to plant a great church in Moscow. But, it's a difficult thing to move around a lot, to keep giving your heart. But Leanne's been doing that, and I'm so proud of her. Not only did she do that, but she completed her master's degree. You saw it on Sunday, and while planting the Toronto church, she finished it all up. So I'm very, very proud of her. And she and Tim have helped us so much in developing the ICCM, and now they have an ICCM in Toronto, which is awesome. And that is another huge joy of mine is the ICCM, and you saw that on Sunday. It's a gift from God that brothers and sisters can have this study of the Bible and really be prepared more in ways that we weren't able to do in the old movement. And I love being around the younger sisters. We've had some great sisters that have graduated from the ICCM. You saw it Sunday as well as last year. It was great seeing Shay Sears, and now, of course, she's going to Dallas-Fort Worth. And just seeing how much she really studied and went after it. Stephanie Reed, you saw her appointed last night. Elizabeth McDonald, you saw her appointed at the banquet. And, of course, our very own Rebecca Rios. She's still in the ICCM and is the teacher assistant. But I love so much how she strives for excellence. And it gives me such joy that women really want to be their best for God. And spiritually, they have really done whatever it takes to help others to also learn and be their best for God. So my third challenge, sisters, is to go back and lift up your husbands, whoever your leaders are, and all your brothers and sisters. Not just the leaders, but have that mentality that you're going to figure out ways to lift up the people around you. And, I'm so excited to go to Chennai, India in just a couple of weeks. It's going to be awesome to be with Debs and Shirley and Vandana. But please pray for us. It's going to be important that we really pull that church in. It's a great church. It's difficult to get visas for the Indians to come and be with us. So we have to go and be with them, but it's also hard for Americans to go there. So just pray. I know God will do miracles. And I want to close out with my song that we sung earlier that I have loved for many years, and I always change it in my heart. I don't say the words all the time because it might upset some of the brothers, but I'm not trying to upset the brothers, but it is Rise Up, O Women of God. to read 2 verses, and then I'll close. It says, "Rise up, O women of God, the church for you does wait. Her strength unequal to her task. Rise up and make her great." You know, our task is monumental, evangelizing the world. But we need to do our part to make the church great and not hold back any of our talents or any of our heart. You know, it's sad to me what happened in our old movement. So many sisters' faith was destroyed when things crashed. There have been divorces galore, and that kills people's faith. But we need to do our part. We can't bury our head in the sand, which was what a lot of sisters did and just pulled back because it was just so painful. And I know that was what I wanted to do, but thank goodness I have Kip. He didn't give me that opportunity. You know, and I'm glad. It was Satan, really, that was trying to pull me back. We need to build pure, loving, merciful, hardline, following the Bible churches. And the sisters' ministry is a vital part of doing that. The other verse, how we're going to do this: lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As sisters of the Son of God, rise up, O women of God. I love you all so very much. We are family to the end.